Hey everyone, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? I wanted to come on here and do hopefully a short video about healthy trends, right? So as you guys know, I'm a trend trader. I play in the direction of the trend, and I look to enter into a position and stay in the trend as long as it's intact, right? So we've talked about that quite a bit before, and the reason why I wanted to do this video now was because we're on the cusp of earnings season. That's what it feels like. This week we started to get a couple stocks that showed really nice trends. And we'll look at those from Monday. We had one yesterday that I was talking about when I was on the mic, and then we had one today. Right, there was a couple today, but we had there was only. Well, I guess there was two of them that I got involved in today. So we'll take a look at a couple examples, and I want to do this before earnings season really starts because I do use the gaps list as well as how much follow through and if we do get stocks that end up trending all day, right? So I do use that as a gauge of when earnings season starts, and I also use earnings season as kind of a judge for how much opportunity I'm going to have and how aggressive I am going to be taking setups, all right? So what we're going to look at is basically the what a healthy trend looks like. And the last couple of days, and I actually, as I expanded this Qs chart, we can look at the Qs yesterday as well, because we had a gap bully on the Qs yesterday, which was a really healthy trend as well. Okay, so let's start with, let me take these, because delete these, because the TAL is an interesting breakout. It's the only thing I have on my watch list that I'm really kind of still interested in. But let's take a look at the KKR. We can take a look at the Qs. Whoops, QQQ. And we'll take a look at the, let's see, we had the ADS and the IPG, I think it was. Let me pull up my trade log here. And ADS and, yeah, IPG. Okay. So, if we look at the KKR, we'll start with this first. And if my charts can load here, I took a couple pictures of the calls that were in the black room. And this was the KKR trade today, right? Long 2701 by 2691, and then these were the targets. This was high of the day. This was the daily pivot here on the KKR. We trailed half at high of the day, and here is the where we trailed a quarter. And actually, I don't still have the room open at the moment, but I'll show you where we trailed the last quarter, which was 27.25, and this was the IPG from yesterday when I was on the mic. We'll take a look at that. I don't have a picture of the ADS, but I did put numbers out on that, and we'll take a look at that. We can take a look at the PLD as well. Okay, so. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, yeah, TAL is a very interesting breakout. I'm going to pass, though. All right, so KKR, let's start with the ADS, right? This was the nicest one all week. This was on Monday. This was a professional gap down, right? So we had this professional gap down. We broke the daily significant pivot, broke through this 200 MA. Let me go back to 5-minute charts. The entry was actually a 2-minute sell setup, but what I really want to focus in on is the healthy trends, and what, as far as day trades, I use the 5-minute chart, right, for stocks that trend all day. All right, so this was the entry. The entry was back here. It was a 2-minute breakout failure into prior support. This was the entry. Had to sit through all this when I was on the mic. Right? I was on the mic from 10:30 to 11, I think, and had to sit through all of this, but entered into this 2-minute sell setup, which was also triggered a 5-minute sell setup here. And my goal was on a stock that is a gap like this, which I thought was a pretty good gap once we broke the daily pivot here. My goal was I want to enter into a position and stay with the position as long as the 5-minute trend is intact. All right? And that's what happened with the ADS. All right? Now, if we break down this trend, I probably shouldn't use the word breakdown because that could have a different connotation, but if we look at this trend, this is what stands out at me, is there aren't a whole bunch of wide range bars. Okay? So we have a slow grind here. And the reason why that's important to me is because if we start to get sporadic wide range bars, that tells me that if they're at the end of the move, that tells me that a bottom could be near, and if they're in the middle of the move, that shows that there's indecision in the stock. All right? But when we don't have indecision in the stock and we have a clear conviction, a lot of times you'll see a picture just like this ADS. Right? This ADS is, we don't get things as nicely as this all the time, but this is a really nice picture to focus in on. But we will get them as we come into earnings season, right? And this was a pretty tight entry. I mean, this was altogether was a 3.5-hour trade for me, right? And they're a 3-hour trade. I think it was a 3-hour trade. Yes, 3-hour trade, right? So ended up taking some on this drop here. Took some more on this drop, I believe it was. Let me put my markers on. Yeah, so ended up taking some here. We got a little bit of acceleration. That was target 1. This was target 2, which was a... I took this target 2 because of the... I wanted to reduce exposure because from the initial target... or from the initial entry and stop, it was roughly about 2.5 hours here, 3 hours. So I ended up taking a quarter here, and then I took a quarter. Honestly, I took it at after hours because I forgot I missed the close because I was a little bit distracted, and so I ended up. This was my exit here, taking the last quarter here, right? So that was the ADS, right, as the short. Okay, so we also had the KKR today. All right, and this was a gap bully, so the ADS was a pro gap down, and as soon as this daily chart loads here, this was a gap down that got bought on the KKR, right here, okay? So gap down got bought, and we broke the resistance yesterday. So what I'm looking for is to get into a stock that has a healthy trend, right? Well, I'm looking to get into a stock anticipating there to be a 5-minute trend, and once the 5-minute trend starts, I'm going to analyze how healthy the 5-minute trend is. Okay, so this is KKR. We broke the high of the day, so we ended up taking half. We pulled back here, and then this. See these candles here, right? Similar, just like the ADS, right? Similar price action here, where we just kind of get this slow grind. We get a wide range bar igniting the move, base sideways, and then we kind of get this breakout. And all of these bars are narrow body bars. The stock is showing a lot of conviction from the buyers and not from the sellers, right? Very few tails. And so when I get a trend like this is something that I want to stay in as long as the trend continues like that. All right, so then the KKR, then we got this wide range green bar. All right, and so it was up like 2.5 hours from the initial entry R to R, so I decided to take a quarter, even though the big target was up here, 27.54, right? So the big target was up here, but I decided to take a quarter to reduce some of the exposure that I had, and the reason being was because we got this wide range bar, all right? So this is another good example of looking at the health of the trend and noting where the wide range bars are, right? Because if wide range bars are coming at the end of the move, that's when I want to tighten up, and we tightened up 2-minute bar by bar. Okay, so that was the KKR. Now, we had to live through this pullback, which wasn't really fun. We ended up moving the trail up here. Once we triggered this buy setup, continued higher, retested the highs here. So we ended up moving the trail up. And then I was actually on the mic, and what started to happen is we failed on a 5-minute buy setup here. Right? So when I was on the mic, I said I'm going to trail this because if you look at the nature of this trend, right, we have higher highs, higher lows. Then we get this equal high, which is fine. It doesn't concern me too much. We pull back, right? But what does concern me is, are we going to make a new high now? And what happened is we got this buy setup that ended up failing, right? And so that's where we ended up covering. And closing at selling. And I did get kind of lucky here because just after this, 2 minutes after this, it looks like some news came into the stock. Right, but we did have the trail, and before then, it ended up covering the last quarter. So I do know that there are some people that end up taking all of the position somewhere up here, which I guess I gave back a couple pennies from that high. This was kind of a bearish sign here, getting this breakout failure here, this topping tail. But I wanted to wait to see if this would get to the big target here. Right? So we did have a healthy trend in play, and my focus now as we're approaching and really starting to dive into earnings season here, my focus is going to be more on falling into a stock, right? Getting into a stock on an entry position and sticking with the 5-minute trend if that's the trend that it is respecting, right? And just staying with the 5-minute trend really until it gets to the big target, right? That's really kind of the goal until it gets to the big target. All right. So that is kind of a quick take. Let's take a look at the Qs also. Right. So if we look at the Qs yesterday, if we look, where are the wide range bars, and are the wide range bars getting follow through? Right, so that's the first thing that I look at. Well, let's take a look. Here's the wide range bar, igniting the move. We got kind of a 1, 2, 3 here. We got another wide range bar, igniting the move. Okay, so we get a little base here, and I wouldn't consider this a wide range bar, but I would definitely consider this a wide range bar, right? Wide range bar breaking out of this base, igniting this move higher here, right? So what I'm looking for is who has more conviction, buyers or sellers? Right? Because every buyer has for every transaction that takes place, there's the same number of shares for someone selling as there is for someone buying. But what I'm looking for is who has more conviction. And one way to look at that is by we have a wide range bar, that means that the conviction is increasing, for example, on the Qs on the long side, because the stock is moving up faster, right? So we'd be looking at the time axis in comparison to the price axis, right, of the graph. So if we look at where the wide range bars are and see where we're getting follow through, and then if we look at the end of each move, there weren't wide range bars at the end of the move, right? Okay, so when we got up here, we started to get, and we started to slow down into some momentum, so we started to get possibly some breakout failures and stuff in here, which is a little bit of a different topic. But as far as this move of conviction, the wide range bars were at the beginning and they weren't at the end. All right? So I want to do this quick video on how I analyze the health of a trend, because this is what I'm going to be focusing in on, right? I'm going to be focusing in on playing professional gaps, playing gap areas, gap bullies, playing failures on the daily chart, and looking to get into a 5-minute trend, looking to go after stuff like the ADS, right, where we got that nice trend the other day, and today go after stuff like the KKR. The other trade that I took today was took a couple other ones, but the other one that I took was the unit, right? So the unit this morning, which was mentioned, Sammy mentioned it, and then I also mentioned the sell setup, which I actually had to play twice because the first entry stopped, which was a little bit disappointing, but it was a immediate shakeout and continued lower, so I got right back into it. So I ended up making a little bit under 2 Rs, but I did take a stop on it. So it was almost a 3R trade, right? So let's just look at this. This will be the last example. And, okay, so here was the first entry, right? 1 minute sell setup. After we broke the doji bars low, I ended up getting shaken out here, right? That's me taking the stop and then getting right back in as soon as we came down and re-triggered the sell setup, right? This, as we approached $20 here, we got a strong reaction, so I ended up covering half, and then I ended up covering the back half here. All right? What was this? This was a pro gap down. The UNIT and the GWW were, for most of us in the room, they were kind of our favorite gaps today, right? And let's take a look at this trend, right? There aren't any wide range bars at the end of the move here, right? So I do think that this probably would have been good to hold, but it got to the big target for me, right? This was the big target for me. So I ended up covering it. But if we do look at this trend, it's in a really nice trend here, right? So I think I made the right decision by covering everything and not holding a runner. If I did hold a runner, then it would have been a much larger move. But you can't always capture the entire move, right? So if I did hold a runner, it would have been a lot larger. But if we look at the trend, it was a really nice trend there. And so if we look at the health of the trend and look at, okay, where are the wide range bars? Are there wide range bars sporadically through this trend, right? And there's not. So this is a really healthy trend. So what did I do in this position on the UNIT? Well, I just managed 2 minute bar by bar, right? And I think if you managed 1 minute bar by bar, you may have gotten kicked out here, but I just managed 2 minute bar by bar, right? This is the 1 minute chart, and I ended up covering all of it. Right, so if I'm in a healthy trend like that, I want to manage by bar by whichever time frame the stock is respecting. All right. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful to you guys. Keep your eye out for these types of trends, right? If you look at gaps, if you look at pro gaps, we teach a gaps course that goes over what makes something a professional gap versus a novice gap and what makes something a really good professional gap, like the UNT today, because not every gap is something that has the likelihood of trending all day, right? So we teach a great gaps class, and if you're interested in this stuff, come check us out in the black room. All of us in there trade gaps. We have other strategies that we trade too, but coming into earnings season is going to be the time to trade gaps. At least that's what I do personally. Right, so I wanted to do this video before earnings season really gets kicked off here, and let you guys know what I'm going to be watching for. And throughout the next roughly 6 weeks or so, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about and taking a look at. All right, thanks guys, appreciate it as always. Stay in process, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks.